Canada's 2015 federal election marked a turning point in the troubled relationship between Canada and the Métis Nation. During the election campaign, the Liberal Party under Justin Trudeau unveiled a bold Métis Nation policy, advancing and achieving reconciliation for the Métis Nation. Shortly after assuming office, the Trudeau government acted quickly on its commitments. It entered into negotiations with the Manitoba Métis Federation in order to settle the outstanding land claim of the Manitoba Métis community that had been recognized by the Supreme Court of Canada in 2013. It also began negotiations with all the MNC's governing members to resolve Métis rights protected by Section 35 of the Constitution Act 1982, recognize Métis self-government, and resolve outstanding Métis claims against the Crown. In December 2016, at a meeting with the leadership of the Métis Nation, the Assembly of First Nations, and the Inuit, the Prime Minister unveiled a new permanent bilateral mechanism his government would establish with each of the Indigenous peoples' national representative bodies. Through this mechanism, the Prime Minister committed himself and his ministers to regular meetings with the Métis Nation leadership to jointly set annual priorities, develop policies toward their implementation, and monitor progress. On April 13, 2017, Prime Minister Trudeau, Métis Nation President Chartier, and the presidents of the MNC governing members signed the Canada-Métis Nation Accord during the first Métis Nation Crown Summit in Ottawa.
I am personally committed to working with the Métis Nation as a distinct Indigenous community. That's work we'll be doing not just today, but for years to come. Together, we can advance not only your rights, but also your rightful place as partners in Confederation. And today, we'll be looking at some of the things that the Métis National Council has identified as its priorities. We'll also spend some time talking about the recent budget to ensure that as we move forward, we have a distinctions-based approach to our relationship so that we can make sure that our investments work for the Métis Nation.
I've been encouraged by your engaging in this process with us. I think it's very good. It portends, it signals that there is a desire to actually get down to work, real work at the table. And I see great hope at the end of the day that we are going to achieve what we set out to do today.
The Accord marked a significant step towards a nation-to-nation, government-to-government relationship based on recognition of rights, respect, cooperation, and partnership. It outlined ways in which the Government of Canada and the Métis National Council and its governing members would work together to set priorities and co-develop policy in areas of shared interest.
The Permanent Bilateral Forum with the Métis Nation is incredibly important in terms of our relationship between the Métis Nation and Canada. It's at this forum that we gather together on a regular basis with ministers of our government and representatives of the Métis Nation across the country to talk about what the priorities are for the Métis Nation.
This particular conference is going to be essential for good ideas, good direction to come from here, and how it's going to translate to where the budget is going and where Canada wants to go with the Métis Nation.
Under the Accord, priorities for the first year included employment and training, housing, and early learning and childcare. These priorities were then the subject of considerable work in regular meetings of senior officials from Canada and the Métis Nation, with oversight provided at 2 meetings of federal ministers and Métis Nation leaders. For the first time, the Métis Nation was dealing with Canada as a partner rather than adversary.
Last fall, we met with the ministers and we provided our asks for what we would like to see in Budget 2018, and we were successful. Budget 2018, for the first time in the history of the Métis Nation, saw substantive programs and services to be delivered by our governments to our people.
Budget 2018 marked the first federal budget with distinctions-based Indigenous funding, including unprecedented investments in Métis Nation employment and training, housing, and early learning and childcare. A sub-accord on Métis Nation skills and employment was signed by Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Labour, Patricia Hadju, and the Métis Nation leadership, the first of the sub-accords that will determine how budget allocations for the Métis Nation will be spent.
I think the stability of knowing that the $625 million agreement is going to make it very clear to our citizens there's a long-term agreement and a long-term strategic ability that exists now.
This is about transforming generations and making sure that people have abilities to improve their skills, their training, their education in a culturally appropriate way, designed by Métis people for Métis people.
In July 2018, at the Métis Nation General Assembly in Saskatoon, a sub-accord on housing was signed by the Honourable Carolyn Bennett, Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations and the Métis Nation leadership. This accord addresses the second of the Métis Nation Year 1 priorities.
As you know, the Government of Canada has demonstrated its resolve to address housing needs of the Métis Nation with an investment in budget 2018 of $500 million over 10 years. This investment supports closing the housing gap between Métis Nation citizens and non-Indigenous Canadians, but it does so in a way that respects and supports your right to self-determination.
In September 2018, the Honourable Minister Jean-Yves Duclos, Minister of Families, Children and Social Development, announced significant funding for Indigenous early learning and childcare, addressing the third of the Métis Nation's Year 1 priorities.
I'm proud to announce that the Government of Canada is committing $1.7 billion over 10 years with dedicated funding streams for First Nations, Inuit and the Métis Nation. Dedicated funding streams will allow First Nations, Inuit and the Métis Nation to better address the needs of their communities and promote high-quality early learning and childcare for Indigenous children and families, regardless of where they live in Canada.
At the second Crown Métis Nation Summit in 2018, the Prime Minister and Métis Nation leaders reviewed progress made during the first year of the Canada Métis Nation Accord.
I do want to specifically thank leaders within the Métis Nation for having shown such vision and not just putting energy into this process, but also putting trust into this process.
The process has paid off. Ministers have listened and worked with us. And budget 2018 is the first time in the history of the Métis Nation that the federal budget has dealt with us on a distinctions-based approach, beginning the process of providing programs and services for people.
Priorities for the second year of the Canada Métis Nation Accord were also confirmed at the second summit. These include education, health, Métis veterans, the new fiscal relationship, child and family services, and economic development. Co-development by Canada and the Métis Nation on second-year priorities is well underway. This has resulted in policy development and fiscal proposals to inform Budget 2019 investments.
So I was
The Métis Nation Accord that our national organization has embarked upon with the Prime Minister of Canada and his ministers is breathtaking in a sense. It has given us new hope. It's given us that we do matter. It's also given us the strength, I guess, to understand that this government and this Prime Minister recognizing our value in Confederation, our value as Canadians and our value as the Métis Nation. And this accord, I think, is lending the pathway to get there.
The Canada Métis Nation Accord reflects Canada's commitment to work with the Métis Nation to co-develop policies and programs and drive progress toward the Métis Nation's vision of self-determination. By entering into a government-to-government, nation-to-nation process of engagement with the Government of Canada under Prime Minister Trudeau, the Métis now have a solid foundation upon which to move forward with a respectful, renewed Métis Nation-Crown relationship for the benefit of all Canadians.